It's approximately 5:35 on October 14th. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. Due to the governor and mayoral emergency orders, the Urbana City Council chambers will not be open to the public during this meeting. Commission members will meet remotely using Zoom webinar. Anyone can watch the meeting on streaming devices, UPTV, or attend virtually via Zoom webinar. Commissioner Pete Resnick is physically present in the council chambers. Can we have a roll call, please?
Carol Bradford.
Present.
Stacy Burnett. Florence Caplow. Daniel Larson. Peter Resnick.
Here.
Francis Rigberg.
Here. Okay, we do not have a quorum today, but we will proceed. Pete, can we approve the agenda without a quorum? Or
That's a good question. I believe we can informally go forward with the agenda.
okay.
Beyond my fancy parliamentarian knowledge here.
Okay, you're in over your head, your wigged head. Okay, all right. Well, we'll just mosey on here. I believe we will not be able to approve the minutes at this time. So we will move on to public participation. I recognize Christopher Hansen. And is there an additional person with a raised hand?
Hi, can you hear me?
Sarah Nixon will be next. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, proceed.
Hi, this is Christopher Hansen. Are you going to let me speak?
Of course.
Okay. You'd sent an email to me recently saying that I shouldn't speak, and I had to email my comments, so I wasn't sure.
That was a confusion on my part, for which I apologize and corrected.
Okay. Yeah, I followed up on that. Followed up on that email with the entire HRC, and not a single person responded to me. So I thought that was a little strange. But anyways, I'm Christopher Hansen. I live in Urbana. I've been speaking at your meetings for months now, with making the general point that my feeling is that your commission is not accomplishing its stated purpose and duties. Last meeting, you guys spent 20 minutes talking about billboards and advertising again. And, $450 for a billboard, $1,300 for, vinyl signs for buses or something to that effect. The effort and money talking about publicity could be spent on almost anything else and have more meaning to the residents of Urbana. I've brought issues to your attention, such as total lack of response from human relations officer on complaints, improper handling and denials of CPRB complaints. And despite what Francis Rigberg has said, you guys are connected to the CPRB. Rigberg was wrong about that statement. It's written directly into ordinance that the CPRB and the Human Relations Commission need to work together to anticipate and prevent problems. I've asked for information about retaliation for filing complaints, and I've gotten no response from the HRC or the CPRB. And most recently, the chair of the HRC tried to interfere, or apparently, with my right to speak at your meetings, and no one responded to that. So, we've kind of had this back and forth contentious issue on jurisdiction about complaints, and jurisdiction is one thing, and we obviously disagree on that. But the other piece of evidence that maybe you should digest is that none of you have actually tried to talk to me about the problems and violations that I've been victim to and that I've so thoroughly documented. All you've had to say about the issue is we don't have a jurisdiction. Where is your humanity in that, and where do you see yourself in terms of your overall duty and purpose? And this seems proof to me that you don't seem to care about the flowery language in your mandate so much, and that you mostly just care about your public image, which goes along with all of your discussions about advertising. And I've offered in the past to answer any questions you have. And in fact, you can, well, I guess you don't have a quorum, but normally you could vote right now to suspend your normal meeting rules and extend my public input, and you could ask me questions. We could have that conversation anytime, just like humans do, and we'll sort it all out, but we won't, I guess. your commission is holding the position that the city of Urbana government is exempt from human rights laws, but it's written all over the human rights ordinance that it is not. Pete Resnick even said the original 1975 HR ordinance was entirely clear that the city was included. So it would seem that your founding documents made that issue clear from the beginning. It would seem like any question about it now would refer back to that initial posture. Last meeting, Rydberg said, quote, "We have a great ordinance. We just have to go out there and make it as effective as it can be." Well, that's what I've been trying to get you guys to do, but your board doesn't seem interested. And you just kind of talk in flowery language, but you don't do anything. So here we are again, and I'm asking you to align yourself with the purpose and stated duties of the Urbana Human Rights Ordinance. And we need to talk about the way that the Urbana city government is discriminating and retaliating against residents. And we have problems with Freedom of Information Act issues. We have problems with police complaint issues. We have problems with discriminatory hiring practices by the city. And now we have free speech problems, and that kind of originated a little bit with Francis Rydberg, and now the mayor and the council have passed content-based speech restrictions at public meetings. And I know your board is going to argue that you have nothing to do with that. That's not your problem, you'll say. But it is. Urbana doesn't have a specific dedicated ethics board, and maybe that's one issue. But the way I read the Human Rights Ordinance is that, quote, you're there to ensure fair and equitable treatment under the law to all citizens, protecting the rights of all persons to enjoy public accommodations and facilities. To me, you are the right group to talk about these issues, and you should be responding. And your posture shouldn't be, let's see how much we can shirk responsibility. Your posture should be, how much responsibility can we possibly shoulder, because that's what leaders do, and that's the right thing to do. So I continue to be disappointed, but I continue also to hope that you will change your position on this and look into these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Nixon? I thought she would like to speak.
Hello, I'm Sarah
Hello.
Nixon.
Hello.
I'm a longtime resident of Urbana. Citizen advocate for sensible government, Christopher Hansen, has brought to my attention the issue of a discrimination complaint that he recently filed against the city of Urbana concerning a vote that was taken by city staff to require that job applicants pass a criminal background check, and which requirement was then placed upon a job description to be circulated in search of applicants. I won't elaborate on further details as they will be already known to the commission. But having read Mr. Hansen's complaint and the city's response, I am struggling. I'm asking myself, how is it comprehensible for Urbana to have a human rights commission that hears complaints about Urbana employers who discriminate on the basis of an applicant's prior arrest or conviction record, yet ducks the issue, in this case citing jurisdiction, when city staff themselves openly engage in the very same discriminatory practice? Clearly, Urbana's human rights ordinance makes it illegal to discriminate for the purposes of employment on the basis of an applicant's prior arrest or conviction record. I am an engaged community member committed to social justice, human rights advocacy, and court system reform. And I have worked and volunteered with First Followers Reentry Program as a researcher on their Ban the Box campaign. So many people all across Illinois toiled for so long to pass legislation that would protect former inmates from job discrimination upon their release and reentry into society. In this state of affairs, the city of Urbana overtly thumbing their nose at our human rights ordinance just makes no sense. Makes a mockery of all efforts and strides made by First Followers and by so many other human rights organizations and justice initiatives here in Urbana and across the state. And so I urge the commission to address the issue of Mr. Hansen's human rights complaint in a way that is responsible, sensible, and just. Thank you for the opportunity to comment and for your time this evening.
Thank you. Let's see if anyone else is. Okay. Okay, that concludes public participation. We're going to move on to, even though we do not have a quorum, I believe we still do not.
Chair Redbird, it looks like Daniel Larson joined the meeting at 5:40.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So you should have a
I
quorum now.
guess see him. Okay, great.
Yep, I'm here. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. Great. Okay.
Do you want to back up in the
Yes.
agenda and do the
I'm
minutes?
going to back up. I'm going to see if we can't approve our agenda. Do I hear a motion?
Move approval. So moved.
Okay. And a second?
I second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Pete and seconded by Daniel to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Okay, let's have a call of the roll.
Carol Bradford,
Present.
Daniel Larson,
Here.
Peter
Oh, I'm
Resnick,
sorry. This should be a vote on the approving the agenda. I'm sorry. Let's restart the roll call. I'm sorry about that.
okay. Carol Bradford,
Present.
You approve the agenda?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yes,
that's
I
okay.
approve.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Larson,
Aye.
Peter
Approve.
Resnick,
Aye.
Francis Rigberg,
Aye. The agenda is approved. Let's move to the approval of minutes. The minutes for September 9th, 2020. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Ready?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Carol.
I second.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. So we have a motion by Carol, seconded by Daniel to approve the minutes of September 9th, 2020 meeting of HRC. Is there any discussion? Does anyone have any comments regarding the minutes? I have a question for you, Pete. Is it all right for the minutes to give any detail as far as public participation goes? Is that okay?
Yeah, the minutes are, yeah, it can just lay out the actions that were taken and we took public participation is fine.
Okay. But details about who spoke and,
That
Yeah.
you can or can't. It's entirely,
okay, that's fine. That's my only question. Any other discussion or questions? Okay, let's have a vote on approval of the minutes.
Carol Bradford,
I approve.
Daniel Larson,
Aye. Yep. Approve.
Peter Resnick,
aye.
Francis Rigberg,
I approve. So the minutes have been approved by the commission. We'll move on, since we had public participation, we'll move on to unfinished business. The first would be the PSA campaign. I wanted to share two things with the commission. One is that last time we discussed the billboard and possibly changing the wording on the billboard. I would like to suggest that instead of saying imagine an end to housing unlawful discrimination, we say ending unlawful job and housing discrimination, and then provide Urbana Human Relations Office, the website, and the phone number. If that is agreeable to everyone, we can go ahead and have them make that as we budgeted for last time. The consensus seemed to me to be last time that would be a appropriate content. But I will entertain a motion on that.
I'm fine with that. So moved.
Okay. Pete, anybody to second that for our billboard content?
I second.
Okay, Daniel. So I have a motion by Pete, seconded by Daniel, to have our new billboard wording be ending unlawful job and housing discrimination. Let's have a vote on that.
Carol Bradford,
I approve.
Daniel Larson,
Aye.
Peter Resnick,
Aye.
Francis Rigberg.
Aye. Okay, I'll move ahead with that. The only other thing is that with regard to the bus advertising, it may cost us a little more than I originally quoted because there will be a lapse between when they took our signs down and when new ones would go up. So we may have to spend a little more than we originally budgeted. We may have to amend that when the time comes and we want to have that publicity. Are there any questions about that? I'm sorry, I didn't really. Okay. Moving on to proposed changes in the HRC ordinance, Pete and Daniel.
Yeah, so Daniel and I finally got together and talked about proposed changes. We sent out to commissioners a draft just to sort of look at, and that just went out this evening. I sent it to Tamara when I showed up here, so you have it in your email now. And we can go over what proposals we've made. So the idea here is we wanted to give a proposal to the city council for either changing the ordinance to clearly include Urbana to be subject to the ordinance, or to clearly exclude Urbana to be subject to the ordinance. One way or the other, that needs to be clarified because the current ordinance is just not clear. As Mr. Hansen referred to in his public comment, the original history was that Urbana and actually several other governmental institutions were subject to the ordinance. The ordinance had a number of changes at different points, and I've got a document that I've written up with the changes over the years. I'm glad to distribute it if people are interested, but it became clear that different city councils decided, no, that shouldn't be the case. Yes, it should be the case. They removed certain governmental institutions, and then it seemed like they removed Urbana. In the end, my gut, and even talking to James Simon, the city attorney, it sounds like some stuff got copied and pasted and never really cleaned up. And so whatever the intention was, it's not perfectly clear in the current ordinance, although it does tend to lean toward Urbana not being subject because it doesn't make any accommodation for it. In any event, the document you've got right now starts with the changes to include Urbana as a possible respondent. The first bunch of changes basically adds the government of Urbana to the lists of people who can be employers, conceivably employment agency, although that's a little funny, owner of property and things like that, or a person or a public accommodation. Many of the changes you'll see in the definitions also straightened out some of the circular definitions, because you had employer defining things as a person, which defined a person as an employer, and it was a little bit of a mess. So I cleaned those up and added in the government of the city of Urbana. And that's pretty straightforward. And then under public accommodations, changed it to persons, which included organizations and the government of the city of Urbana, and specifically stating including governmental services. That stuff was pretty straightforward. The other is that 1263, at 1263-1A keeps referring to place of public accommodation, whereas place is only one sort. So I fixed it to just simply say public accommodation to be consonant with the definition. Again, relatively straightforward. Then the tricky stuff begins. 1281 refers to giving things to the human relations officer. The officer is defined, just the officer, not human relations officer. The officer is defined as human relations officer or their designee. And so removing human relations from that paragraph makes it clear that someone else can be designated in the role of the officer if need be. Then I introduced, and by the way, as I get to this section, this new 1285, much of this is just to give each of you an idea of the kind of recommendation we think we want to make. If in consultation with city legal, they have some boilerplate that makes this a little neater, I'm certainly going to ask them to write it up. But this is just sort of giving you an idea of where we're going. The new 1285 I proposed is basically saying if there's a conflict of interest for the human relations officer or the city attorney in performing the duties of doing the investigation and such, they may designate another person to perform these duties. And if that's not an employee of the city of Urbana, then the city shall be responsible for paying the costs of that person. Similarly, in 12103, there's a bunch of duties of the city attorney that really can't be done if the city attorney or if the city itself is the respondent to a case. So it again sets up an idea of if the, in cases where the city of Urbana is a respondent to a complaint, then the city attorney needs to conflict themselves out and get an independent outside attorney to perform the responsibilities. So there's language on the clarification of that. And finally, in 12105, it's perfectly clear in my version here that it applies to government, it shall not apply to government units of government other than the city of Urbana. We obviously would have a lot of trouble bringing a case against the federal government or the state, and even other subdivisions, you know, bringing a case against Champaign or anything like that would probably be a little tricky to figure out. So that's how that's set up. We do have another section, the second section of the document that I sent you, the draft, is fixing it so it's absolutely clear that Urbana is not part of it. So it gets rid of all of the references to government agency and still cleans up the sections with the circular definitions, and changes 12105 to get rid of that word other and say shall not apply to units of government, full stop. Finally, the last bit of what I sent you, there was a lot of confusion in when we did our appeals hearing for Mr. Hansen the first time around, because it's not clear in the ordinance the order of findings of no jurisdiction and findings of no probable cause. And so the last section simply cleans up the language to make it clear that those can be two separate steps. And so if you find that there is no jurisdiction, the officer can stop there. If there is jurisdiction, then you can go on to an investigation of probable cause. Cleared up that language to make sure that at least it didn't leave us in a silly state, because there were places where it wasn't clear what the commission was supposed to do by way of holding that appeals hearing if the finding was no jurisdiction. The wording was only with regard to probable cause findings, so we cleaned that up. I know you haven't had much time to look this over, but I think next month, after getting some feedback from folks, I think Daniel and I would like to write up this proposal. I suppose, and maybe Elizabeth knows for sure, whether we advise the mayor and ask the mayor to bring this before city council, or whether we go to city council, but one way or the other, that we come up with a recommendation to either the mayor or directly to the city council. And my gut was that discussing it last month, that the recommendation would be we should make the city subject to it. It's not that hard to do. And in the alternative, they should at least clean up the rest of the language. Elizabeth, do you know who we bring it to?
It probably wouldn't hurt to bring it to the mayor first for discussion, so
Yep.
so he's fully informed. But I know in the past, I believe you have brought things and actually made the presentation to the city council. And my guess
Yeah,
is that
although I think for reports rather than recommendations for ordinance changes. So I thought this one, we should, be as strict and by the book and as we can be, not to upset apple carts and such.
So I would say the other option is I could be there as staff and we could do it together.
Oh, yeah.
That's been done in the past as well. But I think if we once you have it in the form that where you feel it's ready, then we have a conversation with the mayor and then we can discuss with her how we want to proceed.
So what I would suggest this is, if individuals read over the stuff, have recommendations or comments, you can send them to Daniel and I. We'll get stuff edited and cleaned up, and then prepare for a discussion next month with a vote on how we want to recommend to city council and present them with this. Daniel, did you have any other follow-up? I kind of hogged the mic there.
No, just, I was clearly Pete's second fiddle on this. So Pete, thank you for really taking the lead. We had a very productive conversation. I think we have a pretty good feeling about the recommendation we want to make. But totally, we want to hear from you guys first and foremost. Your thoughts, and then we're looking forward to getting that proposal and getting this language cleaned up, and as we keep working on this ordinance. So yeah, just thank you, Pete.
My pleasure. So Carol, Fran, do you have any comments on what you've seen so far?
No, it's wonderful. Thank you both for doing this. I'm very glad to hear it. Very glad that I hope that by next time we'll be able to take it a step farther. So.
And just from the four of us here, are the four of us on board with the idea that what we want to do is really recommend the first version of the city should be subject to the ordinance and follow what it can, and then if they don't like that, at least clean up the language?
That might be helpful, since I think that often the public doesn't understand exactly what the ordinance requires in terms of some of these cases of discrimination. And if the city, I remember when I was surprised to find that the city wasn't subject to it, if that is cleared up in terms of being able to bring a complaint like that against the city, that will help in the long run to educate the public. For example, this case of that's currently going on.
Yeah, I did, by the way, I forgot to mention after that we heard from the public input, I did want to mention that I went hunting, and maybe I'll contact Elizabeth offline, or maybe Tamara. Back when Todd Rent was HRO, we had a rulemaking process and came up with a set of rules for employers regarding what applications had to look like and what process needed to be used for hiring to deal with the conviction record thing.
Exactly.
I don't know, I've not looked at the details of what the findings were, but digging that out and making sure that the city is aware that those were the rules we were imposing on the rest of Urbana, and making sure that they followed them as much as they could would probably be useful.
Well, it is in the findings. If you read
The
carefully.
rulemaking stuff, it is.
Yes, I mean, in James Simon's determination, he goes into that issue of the consistency of what we do with the rules that we impose upon others.
I didn't.
And
I
I
didn't notice.
think it's very clear. And as I say, I'm very hopeful that this will somehow enable people in the public who may be distressed by what they see to better understand what they're seeing, and perhaps be reassuring to them.
Yeah,
I
and
think we need to do. I think it can give you always have to be fair and appear to be fair. So it goes to the appear to be fair aspect of anything that goes on in government. So I would say, to my own surprise, I would tend to favor some form of that, not necessarily exactly like we treat others, but to some extent in the appropriate areas that we are committed to living up to our own ideals.
yeah, and I mean, part of what goes on there, I think, everybody should keep in mind. I'm guessing 9 times out of 10, the respondent in the case, or it never gets to the point where the investigation starts, and 9 times out of 10, when there's an issue, the person who has been the possible respondent fixes the problem before it ever gets anywhere near the commission for a formal hearing. And I would expect that, the city would work out similar things should they be subject to the ordinance. So
Also,
glad to hear that.
we are not the only forum in which these concerns can be addressed, which is an extremely important and often neglected fact in the situation. It isn't us or nothing. There are lots of ways that these problems can be addressed in very appropriate ways, and that are set up just for that purpose. Okay.
Fran, this is Carol.
Carol,
I wanted
Yes,
to
Carol.
have an opportunity to speak because I
Yes,
want to make
please.
sure I'm on the same page with everyone else.
Okay.
So first and foremost, I want to make sure I'm understanding what we're, the proposal, because it's a long time in between meetings and we all have our own personal and work lives. And I remember us having this discussion before about whether or not we wanted the city to be answerable to us as a commission. And I voiced concerns at that time about that being the case. So I just want to make sure that, are we still on the path of having the city be subjected to answering to us in the cases of some type of a complaint, or are we recommending a separate process and a separate entity that would look into those situations? I just want to be clear before we go any further.
Yeah. So what I sent today, which you can look over more carefully after the meeting, basically lays out 2 paths. If the city would be subject or wouldn't be subject, the question of are we going to recommend one or the other is separate. I think there are concerns. I hope that some of the language I put in addressed how we would make the city subject to our process without causing complete disruption. But if I haven't, it is still an open question, and I think sort of the core of the discussion next month that I'm asking for to decide which one we're going to recommend.
Okay.
Right. Well,
Okay.
that's still going to be discussed, and should
Absolutely.
Okay, because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss
Nope.
no.
able to give, being able to give that input, because I do have
Not at all.
my own opinions and, like I said, concerns about that. And I just wanted to say, I know there's been a couple of times because of my job that I've joined the meeting after the first few minutes. And so I haven't had an opportunity to hear public input, but this is my second time being on the commission over the years. And I would say probably been involved off and on for the past 15 plus years. And I take very seriously what we do. And I do want to make sure that the public knows that this is not about appearances. I've been a social worker for almost 28 years. And I've dedicated my life to helping people. And so if there is confusion in the current language or anything that gives an appearance of not being transparent and that people are not going to be held accountable, or the city government, then we do need to, not just us, but whatever other entities need to take steps to clear the language up, to make sure that we educate the public on what the rules are and who is subject to it. And as Fran said, what are the other alternatives that they have for pursuing concerns regarding the city. And so I think when this is all said and done, I do think there's value in advertisement. I do think that we have a responsibility to educate the public about exactly what it is we do and what jurisdiction we do have. So I do not think that it's a waste of money. And so, but again, that's not just our responsibility. We are one aspect of the city government. We are completely voluntary, and we do have limited jurisdiction. So I just wanted to share that because I've had a chance to kind of sit back and listen and take in some of what's being said. And I understand the public concern, but I also want to make sure that we as a body are careful about what we're agreeing to do or not do. Because one, we are volunteer, and two, it's not, I don't feel that legal issues are my area of expertise, and I would prefer to leave that to the people that have that experience and the credentials for that. So I just wanted to share that because I have not had a chance to really kind of speak on what's the feedback that's been coming in the public comments as well as via email.
And so, Carol, I mean, I'll take that actually in part as marching orders for Daniel and I. I think in addition to the language changes to the ordinance, which are just, you know, legal language and that I've been trying to fake it on, and hopefully we'll get some feedback from city legal when we do make the recommendation. But the other thing I think we need to do is probably write up a sort of what all this means kind of guide to explain to folks, here's what this implies, here are the reasons that we're making such and so recommendation, here are the alternative ways that people can address issues other than through the ordinance, that whole set of things that goes with this sort of desire to clear up the ordinance. I think we do need to have something that's plain language, what the intention is, and I think I'm going to play second fiddle to Daniel on writing that one up.
Yeah, I appreciate that because as someone who comes from you know, a group that has not always seen the best from the government, I can understand public concern. And I definitely want to make sure that we address that. I personally have not responded to individual inquiries via email because I am hesitant because I'm not a legal person. But it doesn't mean I don't care and that I'm not watching and paying close attention. I do want to make sure that the concerns are addressed appropriately by the appropriate entity. And again, just make sure that everyone's on the same page. So I appreciate you all giving me an opportunity to speak.
Absolutely.
If I could just, and Carol, I'm sorry, I got a little ahead of myself saying, you know, Pete and I kind of discussed what we were feeling, but please note that we are not set in any kind of stone about where we want the commission to go. We have some initial thoughts, that's all. We want to have a really robust conversation next month and decide, as we always do as a group, as to what we think is best for the commission and the ordinance. So I apologize if I felt like, you know, if I said anything that implied that, no, the decision's already been made. Absolutely not. I'm sorry if my comment led anyone to believe that.
Mhm.
No, it didn't. I just, like I said, there's so much time that goes past between meetings, and there's a barrage of emails, and, you know, we all have full-time careers and personal lives, and I do my best to keep up with all of the emails and to read everything. But, you know, sometimes life gets the best of me and that doesn't happen. But it doesn't mean, again, that I don't care and I'm not concerned. And I just want to, again, as much as I can, reassure the public that we do take things seriously. You know, we may not have all of the answers, but when we don't, we consult who we need to. And we try to be planful and as transparent as possible.
That's right. And that's part of our publicity campaigns, which include more than billboards and bus signs, are to help people understand what some of the protections in our ordinance are and what they mean in terms of, for example, discriminating on the basis of X. What does that mean? What does that really rule out? How does it look when that goes afoul? And that's a part of having people understand that is an important part of this commission and that ordinance working in this city. So sometimes those publicity things are important. For example, we're also considering having posting rights in rental agencies and job agencies and so forth, so that people have it, not only the people who may be discriminated against, but the people who might discriminate have this in their face. And it is not something that's going to be forgotten. And knowing what those things are and knowing what they translate to, what they mean, is a very important part of our job.
I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think we need billboards. I think we need messaging on the sides of buses and anywhere else, because again, as someone who comes from a community and a group of people who are often the last to know, I think the more we can get out there and educate the public that, number one, we're here and what we do, the better. And we're actually helping to the community to be able to access the resources they need should they run into a problem. You know, part of the problem is a lot of times those who need the information the most don't have access to it, or they get it too late. And so anything that we can spend even more money if it means that we're going to get information to sometimes those that are the hardest to reach, who probably actually need to know that we exist and utilize our services. So
I agree. Okay. Let's see. Oh, that's old business, unfinished business. We'll move on to new business. And we've been discussing, we'd like to bring up the idea of a housing compliance initiative, and I'll turn that over to Pete.
Well, I apologize that
Carol
is exactly right. That we have day jobs and lives that take up too much time, and I have really gotten nowhere with the initiative. The idea here, at least at the get-go, is to do the same kind of rules process that we did during Todd's administration for employment and do the same sort of thing for housing. to get the word out to landlords that no, they cannot discriminate on the basis of conviction record. The other part of this is we've gotten, there's been some ongoing background conversation that I've been part of about landlords with rental applications that we know violate the ordinance, just at least prima facie. They look like they are violating the ordinance. And so how to start an investigation of that as a commission. I think we have some of the tools to do that. I'm certainly willing to get that ball rolling. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we have a new staff person before long that can help us with that investigation and start doing that. It's kind of hard for us as a commission to do a proper investigation without sufficient staff support. And I'm guessing that Elizabeth has enough on her plate that she doesn't want to do it full time.
She's holding
I-
her finger in the
I'm
dike.
happy to help as much as I can. But yes, I have another job.
Right.
So I'm happy to work with whoever you assign, or with just Elizabeth and Tamara, to kind of set up the pins so that as soon as the new person gets here, we can get the ball rolling, or something for next month, even if we don't have a new person. The commission can start to discuss what the framework is going to look like. So I'm happy to do that, but this month was not the month to do.
That's fine. I was going to say this during announcements, but I think it's pertinent now. Last month, and this is relevant, last month I had the privilege of interviewing candidates for our new community outreach coordinator. And we have a wonderful one. Lamont Peppers has joined us. And I was thinking of inviting him to come and speak to our commission about his vision, his ideas, because he's a terrific ally in anything that involves interaction with the community. He was chosen for a reason for this position. And so I'm hoping that that will mesh with our other activities in this area.
And he is not going to serve as the officer for us. That's a separate position.
No. In fact, I learned a lot about what this position entails, and I'm very excited about it because of the interview process. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually I was going to say his title, the current title is Community Engagement Coordinator. The title
I'm sorry.
has been changed. And if you like, I'm sure
yes.
Timur, I could check with him if you'd like him to drop in on the next meeting and introduce himself.
That would be wonderful. Yes, I must have written it down wrong because community engagement is something that we do believe in. And he's our ally in this. I'm very happy about that. Okay. Anybody else have any comment they'd like to make? Okay, yeah, and thank you, Elizabeth, for making that possible with Lamont for next time. That would be great. Okay, election of officers. Apparently we're supposed to do this every year. So
a rule that has often been observed in the breach.
In June, which it isn't. But anyway, I'd like to open the floor to that. If anybody would like to make a nomination, I'll entertain that motion.
I'd be pleased to move to nominate Fran for a term as chair of the commission.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Okay, thank you. So what do we do with that?
So for elections,
yeah, not a very
you get a second for that.
Okay.
Then you ask for any other nominations,
okay.
And then you ask for a motion to close the nominations, and then yay or nay on the motion.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we need a second on that.
I second.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay. Are there any other nominations?
Move to close the nominations.
All righty.
I second.
All right, do we need to vote?
We do.
We'll vote on
Yeah,
it.
on the motion to elect Fran as chair.
Oh, see how terrible I am? I don't know how to run anything. Okay, yes, let's have the vote on that motion.
Carol Bradford,
I approve.
Daniel Larson,
Aye.
Peter Resnick,
I
Francis Rigberg,
believe she abstained.
I have to recuse myself from this mess. Okay, so I guess I'm nominated. We have a motion to close the nominations?
No, I think
Oh.
I think that was we
That
had
was it.
already closed the
We're done.
nominations. I think you are reelected. Congratulations.
Oh my, okay. Well, now we turn the tables on Pete because we're opening nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Pete to continue in that role.
I second.
All right.
I
Any
could try
other
and sneak in
discussion
and
or-
nominate somebody else, but just for punishment's sake.
Okay, so let's close the nominations then and have a vote of confidence or non-confidence for Pete. Okay, let's have the roll call.
Carol Bradford,
I approve.
Daniel Larson,
Aye.
Peter Resnick, abstaining,
Abstain.
Francis Rigberg,
I approve. The motion passes in, it's the same old, same old. Okay, now we move on to our EEO workforce statistics. Elizabeth. Yeah. Oh,
So we have provided some, based
Oh,
on
right.
the conversation at the last meeting, we've provided, I believe Tamara emailed out a worksheet where
right.
we've provided a comparison of the available workforce in Champaign County versus each of the employers who submitted their EEO workforce statistics. I do want to point out, so we're comparing to available workforce for all of Champaign County. Some specific occupations have very different availability, than the overall workforce for the county.
Yeah, and on that note, of course, as soon as you sent this out, and I think the new spreadsheet is just terrific. I think you guys did a great job on it. But of course, as soon as you do that, I've got 15 million suggestions for how to make it even better, which can, suck up as much of your time as you will allow me to.
We can always improve.
So one of them I mentioned offline was the getting the previous approval statistics to see how they've changed. That would be great. But the other you just mentioned, we clearly sometimes have applicants for contracts that are not even in Champaign County and not even in Illinois quite often. And so having the ability to put in a workforce statistic for the county they're actually from would probably also be useful. But again, that gets even more complicated because now you have to go look up the population demographics and include that in the spreadsheet somehow. A far future feature request, but if you can work out how to do that, it would be delightful.
Yeah, that may be challenging because some of the employers we work with have multiple locations,
right,
in different states and different counties even. So I'm not quite sure how we deal with that, but we can certainly think about it.
And part of it may be for some folks, we're just going to say we're going to look at the numbers and go, well, they're a nationwide company. Are they hitting nationwide statistics? For some of them, I know we've had cases in the past where we've been asked to approve a contract, pre-approve a contract on someone from a particular county, and we've all quickly on our laptops gone and looked at Wikipedia to find the statistics. So it's a nice thing to do. We all have the capability to still look at Wikipedia, but great job on the sheet in any event.
It was all Tamara.
Thank you both.
It was not all Tamara.
So I am not providing any specific recommendations about how you want to handle this, but if you have questions, there are specific, some specific vendors on this list where we have pending purchases that are waiting. So I may be able to help with, a little bit of additional information if you have questions.
Okay. I hope people have had a chance to look at it. There's a lot of information there, which is good and helpful. Does anybody wish to make a motion on approvals for these companies?
So remind me again, is it 15 is the population, is the workforce that
Yeah.
below which? So
Mhm.
anything above 15, we have to do a proper review.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's a little overwhelming, but we do need to give them our approval somewhat in some form.
And there were 15 of them, correct? Okay.
I'll entertain a motion on, certainly on the ones that are 15 or fewer employees. Any ideas about the others? Has anybody had, it's a lot has been going on. It's been hard to.
I'm scribbling
Time
down
is-
what I think are recommendations.
What's
If
that?
I get finished, I'm scribbling down for myself what I think are good recommendations. If I get finished first, I'll make the motion.
All right, fair enough.
So the ones that I would have had concerns about, I am one of those people that I'll just look up the town just to see where it's at. And when you see where, if it's rural and in a very homogeneous, I guess, population, I just kind of overlook the fact that as far as some of the diversity. So I just wanted to share that, like Pewaukee, Wisconsin, and Goodfield, I think is what, just really small areas that.
Which companies were those? Do you have them written down?
Yeah, I've got them. I didn't write them down, but I've got them in front of me. So the one that was, oh, just a second. I just clicked on the wrong one. Vermeer Sales and Service was located in Goodfield, Illinois. And they had 54 employees, 43 males and 11 females, all Caucasian. So no, other than gender diversity, I didn't see any other type of diversity for that particular company. So
And
that was.
Are they from here or are they from somewhere else?
Goodfield, Illinois.
I don't even know where that is.
Yeah. So whenever I see those, like, I'll just look and see, like, is it a suburb of a major city where they might possibly be able to get some diversity, or, kind of what the situation is. So just to try and be fair, when we're looking at, are they meeting the workforce statistics requirements? So Pewaukee, Wisconsin was another one. They did have some Hispanic, Asian, and I think one other Alaskan Native or American Indian, as well as Black and African American. The numbers are small, but again, I think looking at the location and things like that, it's not bad.
And which company is that?
That's I'm not sure if I'm going to say it right, but it's Visu, VISU Sewer,
Yep.
and they're out of Wisconsin as well. Pewaukee.
Got
I
it.
guess I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So I partially wanted to look it up just because I've never heard of it before, but it's like the population is less than 15,000. It's like really small. That community. So where, normally I would maybe be like, okay, that's really, a small number. But when you look at the location, uh, it's kind of like it makes sense. The only other one for me that stood out was the Barber and Diatley, which is in Urbana. It's a general construction contractor. I guess it is just over the 15. There's 18 employees. 13 are or 14 are Caucasian, and then there's 2 African Americans and 2 Hispanics. And we know this is a very diverse community. So anyway, that's kind of the way that I kind of parcel out, is it something that we should pay closer attention to or not? Growmark, I know, is very prominent in our community as far as the work they do, but their numbers, they have a large male, I guess white male and female, and only 3 Blacks and 1 Hispanic, and maybe 1 American Indian or Alaskan Native.
Yeah, Growmark we've talked about before. They've come
Mhm.
to the commission before, and this is one of the ones where and I think we can come up with a list of them, and then Elizabeth, if you know of contractors who these folks are already in the process of starting to work on a contract, maybe give them just a short time, but if not, give them another meeting so that we can get information on their history and whether they're improving at all. But yeah, Growmark is one where if they are not ready to run right now, maybe gather together the history of their statistics and take a look to see if they're improving over the years. Because it's one of the names that I remember we've talked about before.
Mm-hmm. And I had a question too about, I think it's FEHR, FEHR. Did we talk about them before? And we're supposed to get additional information from them, or I'm trying to remember, because their numbers were not looking real great either. But I can't remember. I thought, and they are local, Champaign.
Yep.
So, but I just couldn't remember. I thought maybe I'm thinking of another company, but the name seemed familiar to me. But
Right.
their diversity numbers are really low as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to say Fair Graham is an engineering firm, and I think typically that's in an area where minorities are probably often underrepresented
Okay.
in the workforce.
Okay.
On the other, to Pete's question about, if we know there's a contract pending, unfortunately, I don't always know. As the finance director, I see those before they're final approved, because I approve all the purchase orders and I make sure that they follow the correct, bid or proposal process and so forth. But I wouldn't necessarily know if there was something coming soon. Occasionally people will, I'll have a heads up or I'll notice that we have a bid out, but I'm not aware of anything with Growmark, but that doesn't mean there isn't something coming.
So I guess Well, so I've scribbled stuff down for better, for worse. And let me just put it out there as a motion that we can discuss and maybe make adjustments to. So what I wrote down is a motion for approval as follows. Barbara and Diatley for 1 year with a letter. Blue Scope Construction, 2 years. Brown Woods and Associates, 1 year with the letter. Clark Dietz, 1 year with the letter. Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley, 1 year with the letter. Electronic Data Collection, 6 months with the letter. Because, you know, yes, they're very small. It's only 20, but zeros are not a good number. Fair, Graham and Associates, 1 year with the letter. Growmark, 6 months with the letter. Health Alliance Plans, 1 year with the letter. Martin Equipment, 2 years. United Fuel, 2 years. Upkeep Maintenance, 2 years. Vermeer Sales, 2 years. Visu Sewer, oh, there's 2 different Visu Sewers. So there was the Wisconsin and the Missouri, but I put them both down as 2 years. So moved.
Do we need a second?
I'll second. Oh, go ahead.
I'm mental for it.
Okay, I'm not sure who seconded that, but we have a motion by Pete, a second by
Pick one.
Carol. Give her a chance. As specified by Pete, discussion.
So I basically came up with those numbers just by going with if they were relatively close or too small to even consider, although some here actually have great numbers, you know, that we would do 2 years for all the rest except for Growmark, because I think we've heard that name before, 1 year and ask them for more information, but we'll temporarily give them the year, and then 6 months for Growmark, because I think we do probably have historical numbers on them, and we'd like to hear, you know, how it's going. But that's all I could come up with.
Okay, and Pete, just real quick, what did you recommend for FAIR, FEHR?
The 1 year. So the
Okay.
Send them a letter saying we're going to give you a temporary approval for a year, but please tell us more about what you're doing to improve.
Okay.
Elizabeth?
I just wanted to mention something, not to change what you would choose to do, but just so you're aware of this. So Electronic Data Corporation, I'm just choosing that as an example because I know exactly what they do for us. They provide the software that runs our entire parking system. And so we have a multi-year agreement with them, and certainly we can find a way to disengage ourselves. But the process of going out for proposals and making a selection, implementing a new software system like that is probably an entire year, you know, just to be able to get to the end of that process. So I want you to know we always want to follow your guidance, but be aware that sometimes it's not as easy as it might be.
Right.
So, I mean, I'll just put out there that asking them for what they're doing to improve their numbers and making sure that they're moving ahead with such things is good, and we'd like to hear that. But the way that part of the ordinance is written, if we really wanted to push things, and we never have, we could find that they are not in compliance, and that is by definition a breach of contract, which nobody would enjoy.
No.
Right, which is why I thought there's always a way to get out of an agreement. Well,
Right.
we always try to leave that open in any case. But.
Yeah.
I believe in Champaign, they maintain, oh, Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, so no, I have a question about that. What do we do? What do we have to do as an entity do we just make a recommendation to the city to start looking at other entities so that when this contract comes up for renewal again, we've got something else, another relationship in place? I'm just wondering, like, how
I believe historically we have made these recommendations on the assumption that if we say 1 year or 6 months, that the city will, that city staff will take a look at that, and I think Elizabeth sort of alluded to this, and say, let's see if we can check that out and maybe try and find someone who's more compliant if they can. But that's always been an informal arrangement of sort of messaging by us saying, we're not going to just give them an outright approval. We want to hear what they're doing next year.
That's our whole process, is after the fact. And it's different, I believe, in Champaign in terms of, isn't that, am I mistaken, Elizabeth?
So I wouldn't describe our process as after the fact. So for example, if I get a purchase order for a construction project, right? One of the things I'm checking before I approve that is, you know, did they follow the proper bidding process? Do they have a contract? But I'm also checking to make sure that they've already been certified. So in that sense, it's not after the fact.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Where it becomes confusing is for these things where we have a multi-year contract. They were approved at the time we awarded the contract. Now we're in the middle of the contract, and then if they become not approved, that's kind of where it gets confusing and challenging as to how we navigate that.
Thank you very much, because I was not aware of that.
And the other thing, Carol, is if we find that someone really isn't conforming to the ordinance, we could have a vote and say, we do not certify them, full stop. And like I said, we haven't done that yet. But us being that way, I believe, would be a signal to the mayor that that contract is in breach. And then what they do about a contract in breach is up to the city.
Okay, well, one of the question I have is that when the page where they're supposed to put the number and the different categories that are assigned specifically to the project for us is blank. So we have no idea how many people are going to work on this project and whether they're male, female, race, ethnicity, nothing, because they didn't fill that page out.
So if I could, I'm going to say sometimes, like for going back to the Electronic Data Corporation, when we were implementing that project, we knew exactly who was assigned to work on the implementation with us. But then once it's implemented, for example, our contact is really, you know, reaching out to support if we can't figure something out, we need help with problem solving, and we don't necessarily know who that's going to be. So once we're at that point, we don't really have staff assigned specifically to our contract. And so that's probably why you see that on some of them.
Okay.
And in those cases, it would be good to at least go back to the potential contractor and say, if you don't know who's going to be assigned to the contract, at least in that section, write a note that says potentially everyone or something like that, so that we're at least seeing what's going on and that they're not just ignoring us.
Okay. Any other discussion, comments or questions? Well, thank you all. So let's have a vote on that. Tamara? Yeah. Is she here?
Carol Bradford,
You were muted, Carol.
Sorry.
Daniel
I
Johnson.
approve.
Okay.
Thank you. Daniel Larson,
Aye.
Peter Resnick,
Aye.
Francis Rigberg,
Aye. So the motion carries and we have our approvals. Next, we have a staff report. Elizabeth?
Yeah, we really had very few contacts over the past month compared to what I had to report to you last month. I had one contact about a discrimination complaint related to a local employer. That person, I believe, was referred by someone, so it wasn't based on the advertising. And because the complaint was related to that person's status as a protected class, that would be handled by the Illinois Department of Human Rights. And because we don't have anybody currently to investigate, I referred her to IDHR. One other contact, which initially he indicated was a discrimination complaint, was really not. It was a request for assistance, and I referred him to Cunningham Township.
Thank you very much. Are there any announcements?
Nope.
Okay, well then I'm going to announce that this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.